Welcome everyone to our first panel of the Spring Career Accelerator. I'm Elisa and I'm a co-founder of Repicture. And with me here today is Tabitha, who will moderate our discussion. She's a past peer mentor from 2021, and you'll get to meet her here very shortly. We're very excited to have you join us, and I hope you will all be very inspired and learn a ton from the session. On our agenda today, I'll first provide a quick intro to Repicture, and then I'll turn it over to Tabitha to introduce our panelists and lead the Q&A. As a reminder for students, there will be an opportunity for you to ask your questions in the last 15 or 20 minutes of the session, so be prepared for that. And finally, at 5 o'clock, we'll say goodbye to our panelists and move on to our co-working session. So a quick overview for our guests. When I'm explaining Repicture, I always like to start with our why. And what drives us and why we started Repicture is that currently only a tiny slice of humanity is building our future. STEM fields are this huge force shaping the world all around us, and yet these fields are still mostly homogeneous. Additionally, there's projected to be an 85 million person shortage in STEM by 2030. And everyone, all students and professionals alike, need ways to more meaningfully explore careers, guidance with developing their professional skills and networking, and an online presence that can help them connect with the right opportunities for them. So Repicture is building a better STEM resume where you can explore, learn, grow, and connect with the world of STEM, all while building a more holistic resume that says a lot more about you than a bulleted list ever could. So we do this through our platform and our Career Accelerator, which is our flagship award-winning program that this panel is a part of. In the program, we guide you in growing your professional network, building those critical professional skills, and with career and self-discovery. And we have skills webinars on topics like working on teams and STEM writing and presentations. We do panel discussions like this and just a whole lot more throughout the program. And at the center of that and throughout the program, we are also helping you build a really awesome portfolio of work that showcases all that you do in the program, as well as in and outside of school. And what that looks like is students learn about careers by researching and publishing articles about real-world STEM projects in fields they're interested in learning more about. And this creates that portfolio of work that showcases their skills and interests and passions. And for students, it's a way to stand out. For companies, it's a way to connect with motivated students that are genuinely interested in the work that you do. So there are now thousands of projects on Repicture, and you can use the platform to search and explore based on your major or field of interest. And our students are helping to build this kind of new way to explore careers and see what you might actually do with that biology or engineering degree and who you might work with and who you might work for. On Repicture, you can discover the people and organizations behind everything you see in the world all around us and connect, our work with helping people in society. So last, Repicture is a mission-driven public benefit organization, and our vision is a world where everyone can thrive in STEM. So that's Repicture in our accelerator. And last, before I turn it over, I want to highlight for everyone here and those watching later that our panels are always, a favorite part of the program. And for our students, you can find all of our past panels on our YouTube channel. And we have a wide range of topics. Those are really a great resource for you and for students everywhere. And I encourage you to check those out. And now, without further ado, I'm going to unspotlight myself and spotlight Tabitha and introduce Tabitha. And I'm going to turn it over to Tabitha to introduce herself and our panelists and moderate the discussion today.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Elisa. Yeah, so like Elisa said, my name is Tabitha. I was a peer mentor on the Repicture Summer 2021 program. And I'm a recent Lehigh University graduate. I have a bachelor's in Earth and Environmental Science, and I'll be going back to school in the fall to get my master's in geoscience. So I'm going to give Elisa a minute to just spotlight all of our panelists.
So everyone here. and take it away.
All right, yeah, so welcome everybody. I'm so glad to have you here. And I'm very excited to introduce our first guest panelist, Marie. Marie is a research scientist in fulfillment optimization at Amazon, where she works with mathematics and machine learning to optimize supply chain and inventory models at scale. Her other research interests include applying operations, research, optimization, and AI techniques to environmental, agricultural, and resource management problems. Her wide-ranging achievements and dedication to addressing global problems inspired the establishment of a fellowship in her name at the University of California, Berkeley. This fund will support students who wish to pursue operations research for the betterment of society. She holds a PhD and Master of Science in Industrial Engineering and Operations Research from UC Berkeley and a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering from MIT. Our next guest panelist is Luciano. He is the founder and CEO of LearnHaus AI, a company that uses a stream of AI services to increase learning performances. LearnHaus is committed to having a positive social impact and to addressing the rapidly changing education system with AI. Before LearnHaus, Luciano practiced business and corporate strategy at Intel Corporation, where he specialized in emerging technologies and new product development. He's an active member of the Strategic Management Society, an organization promoting research, scholarship, and community in the strategic management sector, and he has directed and organized open strategy workshops held in Madrid, San Francisco, Denver, and Stockholm. He's a visiting researcher at the Santa Fe Institute, Oxford University, and Arizona State University. He earned his Doctorate of Business Management at Warwick Business School in the UK and his Master of Business Administration and Bachelor of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And our final panelist is Chalenge. So Chalenge works as a product builder at Faros AI, a company that aims to provide engineering companies with the data they need to make informed investment and allocation decisions. As a data scientist, he specializes in developing machine learning platforms that make data science more accessible to businesses and enables them to increase efficiency and performance. Prior to joining Faros AI, Chalenge spent several years working in data science and engineering at Salesforce. Some of his other projects have included using machine learning to track online hate speech and political discourse in Kenya and designing a web application using Python to make previous California Code of Regulation statutes available online. Chalenge received a Master of Information Management and Systems and Information Technology from UC Berkeley and a Bachelor of Business Studies and Computing from the University of Zimbabwe. All right. So again, thank you all for being here. And I think a good question to start off with is just tell us your story of how you got to where you are today. So, you know, even in your early education to your first job, what really influenced your direction? So anybody can go ahead and start.
Well, I can go first. So my name is Challenge. My story is kind of long-winded, but like I'll try and break it up a little bit. My first sort of like interaction with computers was like in high school. I went to boarding school. Then one of my roommates or dorm mate at that time had a dad who was a software engineer. So back in Zimbabwe, computers were really hard to come by. But then my college, we're lucky we had one. So this guy, like sort of like once in a while would sneak into the computer lab. He's like, oh, I want to teach you how to program. He taught me how to sort of like program a simple game. And that was it for me. I was like, this is what I want to do. And it's kind of like sort of grown from there. So initially I started off just basic software engineering, building products, for various use cases that I found in Zimbabwe. So then I went to the UZ to study computer science, but I didn't really fully just like doing computer science. I also like doing business, how to apply computer science to businesses in Zimbabwe. So I got that degree. Then my first job, I got it from a friend, actually. He was like, oh, I'm working at this company. They're looking to start something new in business intelligence. I was like, I don't know what that is, but I think I can figure it out. So that was sort of like my early introduction into business intelligence and AI. So we initially started doing business intelligence, which is just what are the reports? What's the data that these businesses have? Can you provide data into it? Then I bumped into this story. I think there's various incarnations of it about what's called the stinky cheese. There's a shop. they had a cheese, which they didn't understand why it was there, so they removed it from the shelves. Then they started seeing sales going down. So they were like they had to hire people to investigate what's causing the sales to go down. And they realized like it's this specific cheese that they removed that was in everybody's basket. So that's like sort of like piqued my interest in like, oh, so we can use computers to make these like predictions of like what are people doing and what they can do in the future. And after that, that's why I got to Berkeley. I applied. I was like, oh, I actually want to learn to do this. Then after that, it's mostly just been working in AI and do various versions of it.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it's cool how you can really combine all of your interests into one. Everything is so interconnected. So next, maybe Luciano, if you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say, I mean, I think one of my inspirations growing up was watching Star Trek. And I don't know if any of you watch the series or the movies, but like that really inspired me growing up to be fascinated by the power of science, technology, and even meritocracy and egalitarianism, where it's like, you know, it's about exploration and discovery. And so I actually started off wanting to be an astrophysicist. And I was on my trajectory, right? Everything I did was like loading up as on many STEM science classes, physics, and but it wasn't until I started. So by the way, I recommend to all the students, like, I don't know where you are in your journey, but as many summer experiences as possible, I think is kind of helps one learn. And so that's what I started to. I just started stack them. I was on my way to undergrad. And it wasn't until actually in undergrad that I kind of had a chance. I had a dorm counselor who was an electrical computer engineer, and he just like opened my eyes to like, wow, this is possible. And so I switched majors, and I went kind of straight the ECE route and never turned back until I ended up going into kind of a straight up corporate job, Intel, and I was working in there, and I really became fascinated as I was working on new products around, what is it about, how does the company decide what to build? And so it was like, it was foreign, right? If you kind of go engineering, right, you're not ever asked this question, like, oh, why is it that we're building this? And so that really kind of pulled me to a different trajectory. It's like, well, what are the things that need to decide? And then that's where I went, kind of the combination of technology and business. So I did my master's and now doctoral research. I'm just kind of really trying to understand that interplay of harvesting and cultivating technologies on the one hand, and then on the other, what is it about markets and people and that kind of enable that demand, so to speak, that kind of pull these products and services to market. So yeah, so that was, I would say, kind of a little bit of my evolution, and that's kind of the space I live in now. Is in this role, I mean, as a CEO, you're like literally on the front lines of making those big decisions, figuring it out. And it's really an exhilarating experience. So I highly recommend to any of you with entrepreneurial tendencies to explore that while you can, because it's a pretty exciting adventure.
Awesome, thank you. And I definitely second the advice about always pursuing summer opportunities. Those have been some of the best things that I've done in my life. So, and then lastly, Marie.
Yeah, I was thinking about how to summarize my story because it's a little long. But I would say the common thread here for me was I think I always just pursued whatever I was really interested in at that given time. I always tell people that like you can always like change your mind, but you have to give 150% when you're doing something. So I'll start from undergrad. I stumbled into a machine like a makers engineering class. Like it was a toy product design class, and like people were presenting their products. And after that presentation, I remember it was a night I decided, you know what, I'm going to, become a builder. I'm going to make things. And that's how I became a mechanical engineer. And I mean, you engineer forever, right? I still like building products, like tangible things that I can touch. When I was about to graduate, though, I realized that like a lot of the jobs that I would be doing were very like focused on like a small subset of a larger unit, which Don't get me wrong, that's very like important, like understanding how to build like a sub line in an assembly or like a part of a bigger like robot or rocket. That's cool. But I was more interested in like systems, like how can you like influence you know, how manufacturing changes. You know, I come from Cameroon and I always wondered growing up like why we didn't have a lot of made in Cameroon. Like I was just like, why? Like I see made in so many places. I've never been but there was no made in Cameroon. So I was like, how can we change that? And that's kind of how I started moving more into supply chain. I didn't even know what that was called, but I was talking to a couple of professors about not really liking the job prospects. And one of them, like, and saying that I wanted to, you know, understand why systems were not, you know, like, why we didn't have made in Cameroon. And one professor told me, you know what, this is actually a supply chain like question. And I was like, what are supply chains? And so he directed me to this class. This was my senior spring. I had already been applying to grad programs in mechanical engineering. So you'd imagine like I had a whole switch where I was like, I don't want to study mechanical engineering only. I want to now do supply chain. Turns out like at the PhD level, that's usually in optimization, operations research, or maybe industrial engineering. So I actually had to like withdraw my admission to mechanical engineering and take a year to reapply, which was a very beautiful decision. It was the best thing that happened to me because I was able to research, work on mechanical engineering, but also do these applications. And in my application, I had to bridge the gap between making things and operations research. And I guess supply chain was the happy marriage. The PhD program, long story short, I was interested in like supply chain, specifically natural resources, that's like food, like forests, but also manufacturing systems, and seeing how like risk affects those supply chains. And yes, I started doing this before the pandemic. So like at the pandemic, it was a sad moment, sad realization that actually this problem is actually bigger than we thought. But also it was like a career-wise great opportunity for my research to be leveraged. And then when I graduated, I was able to start working in Amazon doing similar stuff. So that's kind of my journey so far, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, I always love hearing stories of people whose paths have kind of taken, a turn, because you're never stuck in one field, which I think is cool to hear. So I'd also love to hear, like, what do you do now and what does your day-to-day look like in your career? So Marie, maybe if you want to start us off this time.
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, I think I'd already alluded to it. So right now I work at Amazon as a research scientist. Basically, it is somewhere in between like being like a researcher in academia and working for industry. That means that there's some flexibility as to how to solve research questions and even asking your research question. But at the same time, we're working towards like a company goal. And that the reason why I decided to do that was I wanted to work more in my research field, but I wanted to be in somewhere that had high velocity and also with scale. So like Amazon like is one of the places with the largest database for supply chain work. Their reach and impact is so large. If you're working in that field, it's probably the best in the world for that kind of research. So to me, it's been a great like learning opportunity. My day-to-day is different. I think it's kind of like research. It's like you can't really plan that. Some days I spend hours just trying to, chase after a bug. Other days, it's like I just like I'm on top of this mountain and I can see everything and I get like all these great ideas for the problems. And I guess doing my PhD really helped me because that's a PhD. Like it's hard to have like all good days. It's not steady. It's actually usually just flat boredom and then some days where you get like some good inspiration. So that's like kind of what the day's like. But because I think I like what I do and I still enjoy it, like I can still like push through some of those days that are not as exciting as the good days.
Great, thank you. Challenge, do you want to go next?
Yes. So unlike hers, mine is a bit different. I work for a small startup called Faros AI. roughly about 30 people or 40 people now. I joined as like the 6th person. So because of our size, things are pretty crazy and you have to do what you need to do. So my day-to-day kind of varies. Like this week, I'm like on call. I'm the one responsible for making sure everything runs perfectly. If we have issues, I'm sort of like the first line of defense from the other team members so that they have time to focus on what they're working on. But other than that, like my main focus, I'm working on a team called Apps. We basically trying to think of like, as I said, like our products mostly like helping companies get visibility into engineering operations. So my team, which is called the Apps, is sort of like figuring out like what are the views or what are the insights that we can provide them before when they come to our platform. How do we think of like the problems and the questions they want to ask the data? So we're basically, a lot of it involves like figuring out what are the data sources that we need for them and how they work with them. Then also thinking of the whole pipeline from like that, the data, how do we provide them with insights, or like how would somebody want to think of using this product? What are the insights they want to have? And just building that so that they, like anybody who comes to our platform can easily and quickly get the information they're looking.
Great. And then Luciano.
Yeah, I mean, so I'd say so I'm CEO, right? And we're super early stage startup. We're less than 5 people. And so being a CEO of a super early stage, nascent, like crazy, fast growing startup is like madness. But as CEO, we do everything, right? It's like the founders that we do everything and anything. So it's literally harnessing my entire technology experience, my entire business experience. And I worked in corporate for a long time. So, you know, you kind of learn different capabilities, but I was never as challenged in a corporate environment as I am now, because I'm having to like literally on the fly every day toggle between technology, architecture, full stack dev, data set design, modeling algorithms, metrics, validation, verification on like 1 hour. And then the next hour, it's like a sales and marketing call, recruiting, dealing with some sort of customer. And then the next call is like something else, dealing with investors, making a pitch, doing for funding. And that's like continuous. So it's really challenging to my mind to toggle between all these different contexts. So I find it exhilarating. And so I don't know, I think on the whole, I would characterize it as almost like a triathlon. And so, you know, if you've done any marathoning or swimming or biking, you have to learn to do those really well. And so I feel like my everyday is like running a triathlon. And like an iron person, an Iron Man, it's like, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go for a little 5K. No, it's like you're running a full-blown marathon in the storm. And then once you're done with that, you're gonna like jump in the ocean with like all these currents. And then once you're done with that, you're gonna get on a bike and like windstorms. And so that's pretty much every day. So it's not for the faint at heart, but I love it. It is the best experience I've ever had. And I highly encourage you to consider entrepreneurship as kind of as a thing to consider, because it will challenge you in ways that you can't get in normal situations. So
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds so challenging, but so fulfilling. So has anything surprised you guys about your career? Like when you were learning what you were learning in school, did you expect your on the job to be the way that it is? Challenge, if you want to start.
Yeah. All right. So it's really interesting that like, you know, all the things that I learned in school, I kind of use them, but I don't really use them. You know, so like I think that's sort of like, you know, when you come from school, like, oh, this is what I'm gonna do, you know, you have the expectations of like, oh, this is how my education applies. But when you actually start working, as Luciano said, like, you know, things happen and you have to adapt to them quickly. And so you kind of still have that background knowledge for you that you learn from school, like, oh, this is how you do and how you think about things. And I think for me, the fast pace of how things change and what I have to do versus what I thought I'll be doing is so different. And I think as somebody like, if you're growing into like a career, I think the best sort of attribute that I learned is just you have to be adaptable. You have to be on your toes all the time and quickly pick things up. Like the technologies that I like, the programming languages that I learned in school, half of them, I've never used them again. But like, I can program like, oh, you move to one job, they're like, we use this. And you're like, okay, I need to learn this, and you pick it up.
Thank you. And if we could maybe have one more person answer this question, whoever wants to go.
I can go ahead. I think for me, what helped setting my expectations was actually the summer internships and experiences. I think Tabitha and a couple of people have highlighted how very important that is. My first internship was quite a shock, realizing that most of what I was learning was good foundation, but not really going to be my day-to-day. And being adaptable, learning how to use new tools, as Chalenge mentioned, like being able to be like, oh, I know how to do this, but we don't use this tool. How can I quickly learn a new skill? And knowing that that's kind of part of the job was something that I had to learn with the first couple of internships. I can't say I know everything, but I do feel like sometimes like your education, if you get a good one, just gives you a good foundation, like an entry level into the job. But when you actually work the job, then you start understanding what skills and tools you use like most of the time. And that's kind of why, my advice is, pursue aggressively summer opportunities or just opportunities to work. Like if you're able to, sometimes some people are seniors or they've finished most of their classes and they have just one class. If you're able to find work, you should probably do that. That way you can cancel out very, very early what you don't like, or you can at least learn quickly what is actually required of you.
Yeah, definitely. One thing that I've heard a lot is that school teaches you how to think. And I think that that's so true. It teaches you how to deal with the situations that you're handed when you're on the job. So what skills would you say that you end up using a lot?
Jump in. I mean, to be honest, I think it really kind of depends as you're getting an example, like what context are you in? Are you like in a mega corporation? Are you like in a medium-sized business? Are you in a small startup? I think in each of those, I'll call it tactical tasks matter. For example, like I know how to do X or Y or Z, whether it's some sort of technical skill or business skill, I'll say. But the thing that I think is universal across all of them are the things what I think kind of relates to that previous question is like what we call cross-functional cognitive skills, like problem solving, critical reasoning, strategic thinking. Now, I think the more one gets, you get introduced to the patterns in undergraduate, and as you go into graduate school, especially kind of in the doctoral levels, a simple example of that is, I believe, for example, like if you go through public education, you're never taught how to design a question. You're taught to answer questions. And even when you go into undergraduate, maybe you start to kind of design your question. But definitely in like master's and doctoral, I mean, that's basically the thing. That's what a doctoral dissertation is. You invent a question and then you go answer it. It's just a certain kind of design. And so I think that's an example of, for example, these cross-functional cognitive skills like around strategic thinking. And so I think that that's something that I use every day, like these cross-functional, it's, yes, of course, I have the subject matter expertise in something, but those change, right? Like now it's machine learning, machine intelligence. Before that, it was Internet of Things or AR, VR, blockchain, whatever. And they have their own different tool sets and stacks and interplays with whatever. But what doesn't, I don't think will change is the those cross-functional cognitive. So my recommendation is try to balance both, right? Because the subject matter expertise is useful because you can like immediately have an impact. deliver value, do something interesting and productive, deliver something. On the other hand, be aware of these cross-functional things that are not directly taught. Like nobody teaches, hey, I'm going to help you to become a very strong problem solver, and this is what that looks like, and here's the progressions. And so be aware that that exists and be receptive to that, and try to kind of take a step back and see, oh, well, what patterns can I see when I'm doing this thing? And that may probably connect to some of these cross-functional cognitive skills. And I think those are very valuable, because then you can span any context. Go to multinational, startup, medium-sized biz. Those are the things that you can flex. And so I'd say that's the ones that I use like every day. Often I dream in those, and so I think they're very valuable.
Yeah, I can take on a little bit on that. Like, I think what you're saying is actually very correct, and it's something that, you know, like for the longest part, I struggled with it a bit, because I was taught to like be an academic. I need to answer questions. I need to write for exams. I need to be able to do that. Until you actually, like, I didn't, like back home, unfortunately, we don't have opportunities to go to internships. We actually do it a different way, where you spend your third year fully on an internship, but then it's very different. Such that when I did my grad school in Berkeley, they're like, oh, this is how we learn, which I kind of like, which is like, oh, there's a bunch of projects, go find a problem, go figure it out, go build something, find a problem. So I think that's something that, you know, that's a skill that you have to keep on learning. And additionally, I think, and often, I don't know why we never teach it, like communication. You can be one of the strongest persons technically, but if you can't communicate your ideas, it's going to sort of impede your progress. So it's something that, like, if you feel like you're not really strong in communicating, it's something that you have to actually work on, actively looking for opportunities. If you're not usually the one person, like, you know, leading a project, or like, you know, presenting what you found on your project, take those opportunities, because as much as you can be technically strong, unless you're the smartest person, if you can't communicate and show what you're solving, how you plan on solving it, you won't be able to function, you won't be able to work with others.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think those like softer skills like communication, critical thinking, they're so often overlooked in school. So it's really important that you're highlighting those. Marie, is there any like common skill that you've had to use that you didn't expect that you would end up needing?
Yeah, I mean, I think as you mentioned, like in the technical field, like some of the softer skills are like not necessarily highlighted. Communication was a good one that Challenge brought up. Another thing that I didn't really think I needed until maybe I got in the middle of my PhD and now is writing. Um, Being able to share your work like beyond like where you're doing the presentation, so writing briefs, writing documents, writing papers, depending on your audience, communicating to science, communicating your science to the broader world. I just, you know, as an engineer, didn't really like have that emphasized for me when I was learning. And so that's kind of something that like it took some time. I was very lucky that like in my grad program, my PI put us on like background literature review writing duty for our first couple of years. So you do that a couple of times, you hate it at first, and then you start realizing how good it is. And that's a skill that I use like even right now. Like, you know, every time I want to share an idea, I need documents so that other people can kind of read it and get up to speed. So I guess it's a subset of communication, but I just wanted to highlight writing. Another thing I wanted to highlight is socializing strategically. So being able to rally people to your cause and to your idea, I think it's like a skill that like if you have, you're already like a step ahead of everybody else. And if you don't have it yet, it's not too late. Now is the time to practice it. You know, you can practice it informally with your friends, you know, try to get them to kind of do something that you think is a good idea, you know, try to convince them. I think there's a book about this. I think it's How to Build Networks, and I would maybe send a reference, I forgot, but it's a pretty short book, but like how to influence people, I believe. But like being able to get people to participate in your idea and support you is take you a long way, because most of the times you cannot do things alone, but sometimes you can be really smart and have great ideas, but you cannot bring people on board to implement those ideas, and so you're not going to be able to maybe shine to your fullest potential. So I think those are some two soft, I guess they're like technical to soft skills that, like, you know, can really make the difference in the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. So switching gears a little bit to more specifically AI, what are some common career paths that you know of in AI? And yeah, if you could just explain like how a student would find those. And maybe Luciano, if you want to start.
Yeah, totally. I mean, to be honest, in my humble opinion, like it's the beginning of a new era. And so the ways to learn something is actually being redefined now. The classical approach to quote formalized or in school education was through some formalized curriculum, like you go at least in the U.S. to some high school, elementary, middle, high school, you graduate, you apply to some college for undergrad, and then you go through some a systematic curriculum by some major, and then like you graduate after you satisfy the approvals of some maybe coursework or grades, and then either you go into industry and or you go into grad school and you kind of repeat the same thing but maybe specialize. And so that was kind of the classical approach, and that still exists. But I think what's happening now in the field, there is so much. Before it was like user generated content, but we have expert generated content being created. And so there's tons of institutes, nonprofits, even just subject matter experts within companies who are creating subject matter expertise. Now, the challenge is that it's not orchestrated, it's not curated, like, oh, here's kind of how you would go from a foundational. I mean, there is some. And so the student, the learner, needs to kind of take on some ownership around kind of putting it together. And so I think we're in a really interesting time if one is interested in this field, because there's probably two alternatives or maybe a third, which could be a hybrid. It's the classical path. Oh, let me go into some university. And depending on which one that is, they probably have some structured curriculum. And the typical ones would be like computer science, or data science, or maybe computer engineering. Each university kind of divides it in different ways, but those introduce the foundationals and then eventually get into the specialization. But I would recommend, if you go that traditional route, I think some of the most interesting kind of curriculum to target that are outside, because I think they're still inventing the curriculum. It's been around for a while. But I think because of how the tools are now intersecting with the curriculum, they're redesigning how they teach it or what they teach. So it's changing even kind of historically how the curriculum was taught. So if a student goes in that path, I recommend be receptive to maybe adjacent curriculum, like maybe logic in the philosophy department, or informatics, or some sort of variation of mathematics, combinatorics, or different, depending on what your major is, you might not need to take differential equations or linear algebra, or even quantum physics, right? Like that's something even more. But that can be very interesting ingredients for when you start getting into modeling, and because you understand the intersection of mathematics, software, and physics in a way that allows you to potentially put together some modeling and algorithms around some, it's a field that you're interested in. So, that's one path, but I think there's a huge opportunity on the expert created content. There's tons of like just content being created by experts and nonprofits that are just like, hey, here's a quote course on something as simple as like prompt engineering, and then so on, right? I think there's not so much theory. That's probably part of it's more application. And so that's something to be aware of. If you choose the informal or out of school curriculum, it's mostly going to be application of it, versus in the in-school formal curriculum, they'll introduce, because they're, you know, that's their field, the theory around it, like why it exists this way. They'll be able to say how it got here and why it is the way it is, as well as the application, as opposed to, but there's hurdles to go through and process, as opposed to the outside. You can just jump straight in and start kind of putting together like no code AI kind of stuff. But you understand why it does that. And so be aware of those different trade-offs, but I recommend exploring both. And I actually recommend a third alternative, which is combine both. The classical traditional, because it is a solid foundation, like we talked about, understanding the theory, learning how to think, and that's going to last the rest of your life, in parallel to all these expert generated content and activities to get your hands dirty, get some practice, get some experience. And there's tons of different platforms, from Anthropic, Cohere, whatever, Hume, Pinecone, you name it, right? And outside of the mainstream Google, AWS, and Azure kind of open AI type of stuff. And so tons of creative startups create, I mean, amazing platforms. And so get your hands dirty, just get in there. And I think combining both is actually that's probably the most effective way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm curious specifically for Marie and Chalenge, how did you learn about and land your current job?
Oh, I can go. Well, I think it's something that Marie actually talked about, you know, being able to convince and network. So my current company, pretty much 80% people I worked with at Salesforce. So my boss and their boss started a company, and they're like, "Oh, we like working with you." So then they brought me up. But like the one I got at Salesforce, I think it was mostly a network through people that I'd known at my time in Berkeley. So yeah, so I think it's one of those things where, like, I think communication and being able to network, find people, understand, like, you know, ask questions, or like, "Oh, I like this. What do you think about this?" People will always remember you, and they'll probably at some point look for you.
So I got my current job after attending a conference. I think more generically, like it's a long story. I always have long stories, but generically, I think what happened was twofold. One is what Chalenge was mentioning about, like, taking advantage of your network. So like I met them at a research conference, and through like a mutual connection, I was able to, you know, have that first phone call interview. But then the second part is being, you know, ready for the interview process, which, I mean, it's very field dependent, but it's always like a combination of technical and you know, like social, like how you vibe with the people in the company. So make sure you do your homework, as in, like, if you know that you want to be in X field, like for instance, if you want to be in optimization, make sure you've talked to a couple of people in different types of industries. Like I could say, like if you're in optimization, you're probably working in logistics or airlines or like machine learning. So it's like you have different options. You could throw a wide net and talk to multiple people in multiple fields, or you could be like, oh, I'm really interested in working in like logistics or airlines, so I'm going to talk to a bunch of people there. That's building your network, but it's also making you know what you need to be ready. And maybe this ties to the previous question, which is like, how do you know where to get into AI? I believe that like in the future, we're going to a point where AI is going to kind of be like math for STEM, right? Like, so it's like, you're going to need to understand the fundamentals of what is going on, because it's such a part of our lives already, and it's only going to continue being part of our lives. Every sector that I can think about is probably going to use some type of AI. So you are like going to use it. Now, what you can do is pair that with whatever you're interested in outside AI. Are you interested in healthcare, governance, world peace, you know, education, climate change? take that, marry those together and make yourself uniquely positioned to make impact in that area. Now, you know, a lot of fields are realizing the importance, and like you can be a pioneer. You're well positioned to still be at the forefront, to be a pioneer in that area. So like I would say, like, this is my advice for this generation, is like, why don't you take AI and marry it to something you're passionate about and be one of the, you know, founding people in that area, and then like you really distinguish yourself. I mean, if you want to go through the traditional like ML route to be like an ML engineer and everything, that's also fine, like for like an established field. But if you feel like you have something that you're really passionate about, like I'm gonna bring back Luciano's advice, if you have some entrepreneur in you, go chase after it, you know, because we should all be entrepreneurs at least at one point of our lives.
Yeah, that is awesome advice. And it's just so interesting to think about how AI can be applied to every field. Like as an environmental scientist, I'm really excited to see how we're going to use that in the future as climate change continues to worsen. But I think now I'd like to move on to some student questions. So if the students want to either raise their hand or even just, you know, unmute yourself and ask your question to any or all of the panelists, you can go ahead right now.
Don't be shy, everybody. All right. Yay.
Yes, go ahead, Kaden.
Yeah, Caden, I go to UC Berkeley. I'm a sophomore and I'm majoring in chemical engineering. I've seen a lot of like implications where there's been kind of a merging between like AI and chemistry, especially for like regression patterns and things like that, where like you do one experiment and from that the model learns how to do that like over and over again. I think it's like really interesting. Would you say there's like a lot of pivot points for like someone in my major to get into like AI, or is it like AI something I would need to know how to use or like implement throughout the course of my career?
I think what Luciana said, like it's kind of the sort of like the way to think of it, and I think Marie also touched on it. I think you could pivot to machine learning and AI and actually understand how, go deep into like how all these models work, the neural nets and whatever the actual technical part. But I think unless it's your passion and you think you absolutely need to do that, I wouldn't really necessarily say pivot. I think it's good to understand, like especially if you're at Berkeley or like any college, go take those classes and just understand how it works. But you don't have to necessarily pivot your major and say, okay, I'm switching. I think what's important at this point, like, you know, again, you know, sort of like those merging of skills is like where I think like I'm a software programmer. I kind of use a lot of like AI in programming half of the time. Like I have like co-pilots, which are like, oh, as you're typing, you're like suggesting things. So if you can find that balance of what the experiments you're working on, how can you use AI to actually make your experiments better or be faster at those experiments, come to conclusions much faster. I think that's sort of like the short term to medium term that I'll take before you like say, oh, I have to be in AI.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was going to quickly add on that, like, you know, like it's pretty much what Chalenge said. One other thing that like I would say is like someone advised me when I was going for my first job to have like a matrix of importance, like what you care about, what you see your life, like do you see yourself doing this job on the day-to-day and those kinds of things. So you should actually, like, if you're thinking, oh, like AI seems interesting, but I don't know, you should probably do a little bit of research as to what the position entails, and maybe compare to what maybe kinds of jobs you would get with your current major and see if this is something that you would be happy with. But again, I changed my mind in my senior year when I'd already applied to grad school. So like you have, you know, a lot of room to change your mind. There's no rush.
All right, I think I saw another hand up. I think it was Parsa wanted to ask a question.
Yes, that was me. Thank you. First of all, hello. Thank you for the great advice and all the great information. My name is Parsa, and I'm also a computer science major. I studied like my journey at Berkeley City College, and I'm hoping to transfer to UC Berkeley next year. My question is that we focused on the importance of internships and gaining, the practical experience next to along with the theoretical part. But for the entry level, it's really difficult to really land that first internship or that first position because it keeps getting more and more competitive in the workplace. So I was wondering if you had any pieces of advice to sort of stand out in the rest of the population and be like a suitable candidate for a position.
Yes, Luciano, I can jump in. I think my guidance would be it doesn't have to be internship experience. You can go volunteer for a nonprofit and do something like and if you really want to, I think, stand out per se, it's like think of the concept we were talking about before about adjacencies. So like, yes, do like, I don't know, some sort of front, middle, or back end development if you're doing computer science, right? So then that's touching your core subject matter expertise, but then connect it with something adjacent, like, oh, I went and did some sort of like customer discovery before I implemented it, and I went and engaged with maybe some non-traditional users and or customers or stakeholders, or maybe all of them, and you did some sort of like survey first and then some semi-structured interviews testing the assumptions behind whatever the solution is that they have. And so even if you say like, oh, I'm verifying or refuting kind of whether we're helping, like assuming that the organization has some presence or some solution, like, oh, I'm just verifying or refuting whether, that we're still tackling the right problem or solving their question. And so you can kind of wrap these adjacent activities with like what I'll call customer discovery type of activities, which typically isn't done from a traditional computer science standpoint, because you're just learning to crank code, or prompt and then crank code and put it together, whatever, right? And so, but I would recommend volunteering, but volunteering in creative ways by looking for organizations that don't have capacity or even the expertise. Maybe they don't even know how to ask the question. So find an organization. There's plenty in Berkeley, right? Tons of nonprofits who would love extra set of hands, especially in computer science, and just give them, I don't know, X hours per week, whatever you can, and maybe make it creative. Like, oh, here's my technical scope, and then here's my, I'll call it design scope, my community engagement scope, and combine them both. And that will make you stand out because typically, I did recruitment at Intel back when I was there. I mean, you'll get the super specialists, right? Like, oh, we hyper specialized in whatever. And you very rarely you get, yes, I have subject matter expertise, and look at all these adjacent kind of other activities and expertise that I have. That stands out. And then especially if you say, here is my impact. I engaged, let's say, this community of stakeholders, and I had a sampling of whatever, and I processed their requirements or whatever you want to call it here. And then I went back and I reformulated our requirements and redesigned front, middle, back end, whatever, added some new features, capabilities. And then I went back and I tested it with these stakeholders, got some statistics, whatever, feedback, positive sentiment. And then I took those learnings, brought it back, redid a couple of revs, and then went back to them, and you kind of show those cycles. That's a beautiful interview, right? Because you're showing your process, you're showing your impact, you're kind of combining the technical with this non-technical community engagement piece, and that's a beautiful story. And so I would recommend something like that. And then, you can just kind of imagine permutations of that in different ways. And then that will, I think, help you stand out with kind of the oh, now I want to go work for, let's say, some paid internship kind of thing, or co-op even. They'll see these kinds of portfolios and I think be impressed.
Thank you so much.
I think I was also going to suggest, if you can, like, try to go for a co-op. Those usually happen during the semester and there are fewer people applying. It's just like a numbers game. So if you can do that, like, and you're flexible, you should consider doing that. Also, kind of like in line with what Luciano said, you can like volunteer yourself to a company, but you can also volunteer yourself to yourself. This takes more discipline. I would say that, like, if you take a project class, like really think critically about what project you're going to start and if you can build on that project. For instance, let's say my project was to build a website. Okay, this is very fundamental. This is probably no project class, right? I could start by like, oh, I want to build a website about, like, you know, my shopping habits. And then I could be like, oh, what if I gather X people shopping habits and ask this question, right? So you can start off like with a class project so that you're not starting from scratch, and you can really like elevate it with some of the ideas Luciano suggested, right? Customer engagement, feedback, asking a bigger, broader question, like really some open-ended question that doesn't have answers, and building your tools. I think the best example that I saw was, like, I was talking to a recruiter and she was telling me the best interview she gave was this person that was coming from the social sciences, but that was applying for, I think it was a data science job. And he pretty much built a tool, a website that was able to do some survey analysis on questions that were related to his research. And he actually gave answers and gave like propositions for how they could make it better. And so like he started off with this small project, built it into this whole thing. And so I would say that like that takes a bit more discipline because you need to kind of think outside the box. But if you can pull that off, that kind of sets you apart from other people.
Appreciate it.
All right, I think we have time for one last quick student question. I see somebody has their hand up right now. So if you want to go ahead.
I think it's me. Yeah, so I'm May. I'm a senior majoring in computer science at UC Berkeley. Yeah, I'm a non-traditional student because I did a software engineering in China a long time ago. Yeah, and then the 6-year data science and also 3-year data analyst. Yeah, so after I immigrated to America, then I just started to learn more, want to pursue another career. So I attended the UC Berkeley and majoring in computer science. Yeah, so I now also passion AI, and I taken 2 seminar class, large language modeling at the UC Berkeley now. So because I feel it's really challenging for me to find a traditionally software or data science role because of my English, and also because I'm a single mom with 2 young children. Yeah, harder to balance of my life. So that's why I started last year. I tried to learn more natural language processing, and this year also we are doing 2 capstone projects about large language modeling. But I feel still challenge to me because I'm an undergraduate student. I feel if I pursue this way, maybe yeah, they need a master or PhD student. Yeah, that is my worry. I'm wondering, yeah, could you give me some suggestion? How could I still pursue this way with graduate students?
All right, so we are at 8 o'clock right now. So if we could just get a really quick answer for this question.
Yeah, wait, Luciano, did you want to go? I'll make it really quick. I was gonna say, like, of course, this is not gonna answer all your questions. I do think that, like, one, don't throw away your experience from China. This is just a language barrier. So being able to leverage what you have done would probably also like go into making you look valuable. The second thing I would say is that see how you can kind of tie like what you did like while you were working before to like what you have right now. If you can find like some ways to bring them together, like that could actually place you well, because like masters and PhD is good, but people with like 5-6 years experience like are about the same level as masters or PhD, right? So don't throw away that old experience. It's kind of like going to be my strong takeaway.
I see. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
yeah. I was gonna add a quick add because I kind of feel I don't have kids, so I can't really speak about that part. But like in terms of like sort of transitioning from like the non-US background, I worked in Zimbabwe for 3 years, and then I came and did a master's. And getting my first job, I don't want to lie to you, was really rough because I decided to do my internship out of the US, where you know if you get an internship here, usually that leads to your first job. So I kind of struggled in that. But I think there's two things. One, you have to just keep pushing. Again, talking about, networking, keep like, going to those circles. I know language obviously is a barrier, but I think since it's a technical field, you will be able to get past it through. Usually, I call it, you need that first rubber stamp where somebody says, this person knows what they're doing, and after that, you'll be surprised how many opportunities are going to come for you. But again, like, yeah, I agree with Marie, just like, you have a lot of work experience. So just figure out how to sort of tie it to what you're doing right now with your with your sort of like, at UC Berkeley, and say, I already did this. This is what I can do. And sort of emphasizing that more. And also just saying, I'm mostly here just because I need sort of like the US education. It's pretty important, but just keep pushing. It sometimes takes longer, but once you get through, it's going to work out.
I just want to throw in one side, like third one-liner is I totally agree with my colleagues, and you kind of mentioned it, but didn't go deeply into it about being a mom, single mom with 2 children. I think that's very powerful. Like to do that and go back to school and get your undergrad in computer science is no joke, right? Any STEM field's no joke. So that says a lot about you, your tenacity. And so I think, I don't know, highlight that. And a field that I would say to potentially that would appreciate that tenacity would be education and learning field of technology companies, whether it's a startup, medium, big company, like any organization that is in that, because and they tend to, I think, kind of value those kinds of backgrounds, or even, appreciate them. And so I would recommend looking that particular field in particular, because there's a lot of like mom ventures and mother-led type of opportunities. And so I think that would naturally lend itself to that. So that's all I would say. And then I'll put my LinkedIn in the chat before we leave. Feel free to connect and follow up and, follow up with any questions.
Thank you so much, Fantin, for all these suggestions. Really appreciate it. Yeah, definitely will connect with you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you all so much for being here and for answering all of the questions that we had for you. I'm going to turn it back over to Elisa to do a final wrap up.
Yeah, I'm going to second what Tabitha just said. Just thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wisdom. So many good insights shared today. I'm going to have to do a recap later. And thank you also for going a little over. This happens pretty much every season, the first panel that we do, so we're a little out of practice, but I think we did good. Stay only 5 minutes. Thank you again. Thank you again so much, everyone, for joining us. And students, you can stay on for the co-working session. And panelists, thank you so much again. And we will all be in touch with you, I'm sure. All right, take care.
It was a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Mhm.